Welcome to the Ranchonomics podcast, where we empower you to build a better ranch and transform your operations into a thriving business. I'm your host, John Haskell. Let's get started. This is part 2 of an interview we started last week. If you haven't already, we encourage you to go back and listen to part 1, and we're going to take off from where we left off.
I just had a couple case studies that I just personally, when starting the business and the services, you say, well, this is the solutions we're solving. This is the value add. And you really, what is inspiring to me is to see these different businesses and their leadership and the ways in which they're taking some of the best feedbacks in natural resource accounting and turning that into revenue streams and multi-generational examples. And so I had a few examples if we had a moment.
You bet. Let's do them.
All right. So one is, we know that there's a huge benefit if we can get public grazing leases. The cost to graze on public lands is typically a much better deal for the livestock enterprise than if we were to go and buy that land, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those relationships are extremely important. And there's a lot of turnover in governments, and there's a lot of interpretation between agency offices even. Some people are by the book, some are, they're their own personality. And so one example was, there was a rancher south of Salida, and they were doing land monitoring and mostly doing photo points and some very tried and true land monitoring methodologies. They ended up sharing that with their Forest Service office, and they accounted for that. They got to know that this rancher was trying to leave it better than they found it. Things were improving upon the permit, and that person left. And that person also threw away 8 years of information about the health of that Forest Service permit.
Yeah, that's terrible.
So fortunately, their monitoring was all accounted for in the data store account that we had. And that person replenished the Forest Service file immediately. Secondly, there was an environmental organization that sued that rancher and 13 other ranchers that were grazing on public land, saying that livestock wasn't good for the world and that we needed to cancel these grazing contracts. Those ranchers came to the table with their monitoring program, their monitoring data, saying, this is the information we have. We're trying to leave it better than they found it. They had much more data and proof and won the court case. So those families could continue grazing with like multi-generational grazing in these areas. So that was a really heartfelt win, where a lot of this stuff in the regenerative movement hasn't really seen the legal test, if you will. And I think that's going to come more to the surface as the marketplace grows. But it's nice that these ranchers can be on the backbone of something that's already held up in court.
Yeah.
And one of our clients says it's a bulletproof monitoring plan. It speaks the same language as government agencies, but was baked by Charlie Orchard for ranchers.
Yeah. And we've seen, up close and personal, I've seen up close and personal multiple times that the agencies have a responsibility to monitor. Doesn't always happen, for one. Sometimes, just like you say, there's sometimes a problem with the data. There's a lot of turnover in people, like things can happen. And there's a certain point where we as the tenant or the lessee or the owner of that permit need to take responsibility and go ahead and guarantee our performance or our defense there at a certain point, right? As much as it's supposed to be the agency's job, there are way too many situations where that doesn't happen.
And every 4 years that funding and the financial support of these governmental systems can shift, and that's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
So we're going to be a common, universal language to keep those relationships strong, and all the agency offices that our clients decide to work with, their choice, that's just very proactive for them. It creates resiliency and hopefully an unfair advantage for them to get the next permit that comes up.
Yeah, it's been a little while since I've worked directly with agencies on monitoring, and I'm curious. I have not always found the results of agency monitoring to be that intuitive as far as how it relates to practice. And I have found that doing our own monitoring also can give me a much closer tie back to yeah, this actually helps me change my management, as opposed to the agency's monitoring, which helps it meet its objectives. Well, its objectives and mine are not necessarily the same, right? So I am tailoring my monitoring to be much more specific to what I need to know in order to be a better manager, by my definition, right?
Correct. Yeah. And you empowering yourself, your boots on the ground in real time. And by you just educating yourself on highest quality forages, utilizations that you're after, how are they behaving this year? How do you want to leave them so that, might be 2-3 years of drought, that they're best positioned to respond and bounce back as quickly as possible.
Yeah, very good. Okay, other examples. What else you got?
Another was a client that was just assessing if they were to participate in the voluntary carbon market space. They said, well, let's run a study, say where we've done additional strategies and practices. We did a measure, remeasure style of monitoring, which is kind of the gold standard for the carbon market space. They were coming out around 4.5 tons per hectare and potentially millions of dollars that they would have added to their enterprise. They were a larger land holding if they wanted to enter into the carbon market space. And looking at the situation much more holistically, marketplaces, market exposure, what the carbon market exposure was. We had some of the leading carbon market registries, like just they kind of have ups and downs. As CEO of Vera, not that long ago, stepped down for some forestry carbon market credits that were sold, and that unfortunately affects everybody in the industry.
Yep.
So they decided could be potential huge financial upside for our enterprise, but given the culture and the business that we are and the risk of our name and reputation, like it's not a good time for us to be entering into the carbon market space. I thought that was really interesting. Obviously, you see how a business kind of handles those decisions and the financial ramifications that could have been really big and positive, and just some of the integrity that people have. I think the carbon market space is definitely maturing, and I think right now we're, based upon some other leaders in the industry, we're in a carrot phase where you're getting some financial incentives or stickers for doing good things. But based upon looking at international markets, especially over in Europe, they have a much higher level and standard of compliance. And we think the market for ecosystem services is going to bump more towards 2030. And we're going to get more into the stick phase, where this is kind of going to be the standard. Like every consumer and state, country, they're going to expect that the products they're purchasing have some sort of proof and reporting attached to it that it's not doing a lot more harm and it's doing well or better than what consumers are expecting. So that's kind of down the road. But that was another one related to the carbon market space. And the other is just kind of smaller operations that are involved in, like Equip. That we did some monitoring for our flagship property north of us here in Fort Collins, and they got a fourfold return that year on their monitoring program, where we were just helping them with management. They flipped that into an improved grazing program and got a great return. And nothing excites us more than to hear farmers and ranchers taking this information and getting returns on it.
Right. And their return came in grazing performance. Explain where the return came from.
I forgot the NRCS Equip number that they applied to, but they were one of the first. It was some improved grazing standard, and they were one of the first in the state of Colorado to apply for that and receive those funds. And so they really pioneered that with the land management impact report. And literally it was created for the rancher, and that was nice that NRCS office received that and accepted that as your proof of improving the grazing planning, which we were also doing.
Right. Awesome. We often see with agencies like NRCS, right, that the focus is on the practice implementation, not necessarily on the ground results. So that's a place where I think we can go beyond, we put the fence in, we put the watering in, we change the grazing management. but did it actually change plant composition, carbon storage, water cycling, infiltration, that sort of thing?
Well, yeah. And I mean, some of the other proof in the pudding is when you're in a drought and you get like this place, I'm trying to remember exact numbers, but approximately they got, 20% of the production that they typically do. The operation did not, they slightly reduced their stocking rates compared to their
Right.
average. Okay. The average utilization on the forages and on the impact to the inventory on the ground was still around 25-30%, which is kind of what most people in rangeland health will applaud. And so by not having to take such a financial hit and such a downturn and still get adequate livestock performance is a huge financial boost to a more resilient livestock operation.
Yeah.
So those
Yeah,
are
fascinating.
some of the other like returns that go above and beyond some of
Right.
these programs and outcomes.
Yeah.
Another one that was pretty fascinating, and again, it was like a program created to just help managers manage the land and livestock business better. They were using a couple other additional indicators of soil health and rangeland health and biodiversity and turning that into impact accounting statements for their business. They grew a food brand based upon the information on land health, and that brand not that long ago sold for, it was a behind the scenes store sell of 300 to 500 million dollars. And if you look at the marketing aspect of how valuable that is to a company selling, it's somewhere between 10 and 30% of the sale value. It's just another one of those things where these dollar figures was not correlated to your stocking rate, which is what I typically
Right.
think about. And I was just like, all right, this information is super valuable, and data, they say it's more valuable than oil and gas right now, right?
Right.
Well, the data and information coming off of these rangelands, a part of our business is that is why we hold this in a vault that is owned by the ranchers. And that data store account is only opened if the rancher tells us that, yes, we have a value added opportunity as this rancher did, obviously, for the brand that they were growing. And there's something that kind of like blew a paradigm to help us think as ranchers outside of the box and say, there's a lot of additional value if we have the means to think creatively about how to
Yep.
use this information.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think we increasingly are learning that in our world, right? The data is as valuable as the product itself often, right? If we can, Charlotte Smith said that she would rather get your email than sell you a steak the first round. So that's a very, very different approach to life.
It is, and it's, to some degree it's not healthy, and that's why it comes again back to what is the culture of these operations. And with AI, like artificial intelligence and the technology coming out today, the only way that we're going to, I guess, celebrate and bolster the culture of rural America and these small towns that have something, I think, totally invaluable, it's just priceless, is to use the information technology to celebrate who we are, to celebrate our business strategy, and do it the way that we want it done on our lands, in our communities. And that's what we're doing with our technological advancements and our business strategy. One thing I typically say to folks is we want people to understand and believe that they're not here to live in an environment, but to create an environment worthy of them, worthy of their children, worthy of who they are. And that's priceless and far beyond the financial value. And if we're a good fit for helping people do that, that's where we want to be.
That's awesome. And empowering them with the information they need to actually create that as they see it is a pretty awesome job there, pretty awesome tool.
It's a very fast changing space. There's a lot of temptation for the advancements to not trust ourselves to make the decisions and think that someone else in academia or in some other organization might have it figured out better than us. And we kind of have sat in those rabbit holes and know that it's absolutely the boots on the ground that has to be the one creating, orchestrating how they want it done, how they want the pieces to fit together. And we're just that natural resource expert in their business, as you guys are those financial experts, and you can help them figure out that best fit for them.
Right. Love it. Okay, Ryan, let's wrap up. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. This is fascinating stuff. Again, we talked about how to get a hold of you, snaplands.com. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. And get on the website. Tell me your email again.
Yeah, just support@snaplands.com.
Very good. Cool. Well, Ryan, thank you very much for your time. Really glad to hear you talk through this stuff. Really glad for the customers we've been able to work on together. There are some interesting opportunities to collaborate there that I'm looking forward to. And I'm excited about the things that have kind of already happened in that realm and look forward to more. So, Ryan, thank you very much.
Yeah. And John, thanks to you and your team and for all that you're doing. I think there's a super great niche there. Anything that we can keep people back in the saddle and reducing less time punching numbers and helping them make efficient decisions is, I think, a huge win for those folks. So thank you.
Agreed. Same to you. Well, all right. Have a great afternoon. We'll talk soon, Ryan. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
You bet. Thank you for tuning into the Ranchonomics podcast. We hope this episode helped you win today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend.